I'm writing this while the memory is still fresh, though the incident happened a few nights ago, and each passing day leaves me more uncertain about what exactly transpired that eerie night. To set the stage, this all unfolded in the Olympic Peninsula, nestled along the Hood Canal. My girlfriend's parents had recently acquired a picturesque riverside property in a remote wooded area, reachable via a winding private gravel road with a scattering of neighboring houses around. Their land was embraced by dense forest on all sides, though glimpses of neighboring houses could be discerned to the left and right. The evening had progressed into the quiet hours after we finished watching a movie. Everyone had retired to their beds, but I remained awake, absorbed in my phone. The windows were open, inviting in the gentle sounds of the flowing river outside. Close to the stroke of midnight, I began hearing splashes from the river, which made my dog stir uneasily. My initial thought was that it was probably elk or deer, common in these wild parts, crossing the river. Nothing unusual. But then, after the splashes ebbed, another sound intruded. A repetitive animal cry. It was unlike anything I'd heard before, a peculiar blend of bellow and scream, with a peculiar depth and cadence. Certainly strange, but it could still be attributed to some unknown animal. This went on for what felt like about 10 minutes, interspersed with what seemed like huffing or snorting sounds. I was alert now, listening intently, and trying to soothe my agitated dog, who seemed equally perturbed. As I listened further, the source of the sound seemed to draw closer. Initially, it sounded like it was coming from across the river, but then it shifted to the right side of the house, closer than comfort would allow. The cries transformed into something unnervingly familiar yet inexplicable. It sounded like a human crying out for help, but it was deranged, disconcerting, and twisted. It was as if someone were screaming help while struggling to articulate the words correctly. Just thinking about it now sends shivers down my spine. At this point, I was thinking, what the hell is happening? I woke up my girlfriend, and together we listened in eerie silence. We were both jolted to our senses when we heard a more pronounced help amidst the terrifying screams. Both our dogs went berserk, and the screaming ceased amid the ensuing commotion. Her parents, unfortunately, were not able to fully grasp the unsettling sound due to the chaos. We swiftly armed ourselves with flashlights and scanned the area around the house from the windows, but we found no signs of humans or animals. We even checked downstairs, making sure doors and windows were securely locked. That night passed without sleep, and as morning light filtered in, we decided to investigate the property's perimeter. Our search yielded no traces of any creatures or humans. I half expected to stumble upon grisly human remains or some equally horrifying evidence, given the intensity of the screams. It was akin to what I'd imagine a person being brutally attacked would sound like. In hindsight, I regret not venturing outside, armed, to probe further. Over the last couple of days, I've been obsessively racking my brain, scouring the internet for any animal sound that might resemble what we heard, but I found nothing even remotely similar. If it weren't for my girlfriend hearing it too, I might have convinced myself that it was all a figment of my imagination. I'm desperate for any insights or shared experiences from this community that might help decipher this bewildering and unsettling enigma. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie shadows beneath the towering trees. I was alone in the heart of the woods, surrounded by the symphony of rustling leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. It was a serene evening, or so I thought. I had always been drawn to the woods. The solitude, the whispering wind, the dappled moonlight filtering through the branches. It was my sanctuary. But on this night, that sanctuary would become a realm of true horror. As darkness descended, I decided to start my hike back to the cabin. The path ahead was familiar, and I had a trusty flashlight to guide my way. The eerie quiet, however, was unsettling. Even the nocturnal creatures seemed to have fallen silent. My heart quickened as I walked. The dense trees obscured the stars, and the forest felt impenetrably black. I switched on my flashlight, its feeble beam pushing back the encroaching darkness. My footsteps echoed eerily through the woods, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That's when I heard it, a faint, distant rustling, like footsteps creeping through the underbrush. I halted, my senses on high alert. Was it just a deer, or something else entirely? I strained my ears, hoping for a rational explanation. The rustling grew louder, closer. Panic set in as I realized the footsteps were distinctly human. Who would be out here at this hour, deep in the woods? I called out, my voice trembling, but received only silence in response. With each step, the unseen intruder drew nearer. I quickened my pace, trying to maintain composure. But then, the footsteps stopped abruptly, just beyond the reach of my flashlight's glow. It was as if the forest itself held its breath. And then came the voice, a low, guttural whisper that sent shivers down my spine. It spoke words I couldn't comprehend, in a language I'd never heard. Fear washed over me like a tsunami, and I fled, not caring where I was headed, only desperate to escape the unseen terror. My heart pounded in my chest as I ran, twigs and branches clawing at my skin. I couldn't shake the feeling of being pursued, of being hunted. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees twisting and contorting, as if trying to trap me within their dark embrace. Eventually, I burst into a clearing, gasping for breath. I glanced over my shoulder, but there was no sign of my pursuer. The woods had fallen silent once more. I stumbled back to the cabin, locked the door, and spent the night in a paranoid vigil. Morning brought no answers. I searched the woods with friends, but we found no trace of the mysterious intruder. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night. An encounter with an unknown presence in the heart of the woods, a true horror that lingers in my nightmares. Deep within the woods of whispering pines, where ancient trees loomed tall, and the silence was broken only by the gentle rustling of leaves, I embarked on an ill-fated adventure that would etch a true horror story into my memory. My fascination with the woods had always drawn me to this secluded sanctuary, a place where solitude and the embrace of nature brought me solace. But on this particular day, the tranquility would morph into a living nightmare. I set out late in the afternoon, the sun casting long shadows as it began its descent. The trail ahead was familiar, the well-worn path cradled by gnarled roots and cloaked in dappled sunlight. A sense of peace enveloped me as I ventured deeper into the woods, my trusty flashlight, and a small backpack of supplies in tow. As twilight painted the forest in hues of indigo, I realized that time had slipped away from me. The trail, which had once been a friendly guide, now seemed unfamiliar, and darkness encroached rapidly. Panic flickered within me, but I reminded myself that my flashlight would guide me back. Yet, as the night deepened, the forest adopted a sinister demeanor. The shadows danced menacingly, and the gentle breeze whispered secrets that sent shivers down my spine. An eerie sensation of being watched gnawed at my nerves. I switched on my flashlight, its beam a feeble attempt to pierce the pervasive darkness. My footsteps echoed in the silence, and I strained my ears, hoping for any sign of life in the woods. But the forest remained hauntingly quiet, devoid even of the nocturnal symphony I'd come to expect. Then, a sound, a faint rustling, like footsteps in the underbrush. My heart quickened, and I stilled, listening intently. I wondered if it might be an animal, but it sounded distinctively human. My mind raced with questions. Who would be here in the dead of night? What could they possibly want? I called out, my voice trembling, but received no reply, only the persistent rustling, now closer, stalking me like a phantom. Fear gripped me, and I made a decision: turn back and leave this unsettling forest behind. But as I retreated, the footsteps pursued, closing the distance with every passing moment. Panic surged as I realized I was being chased. I fled, my breath ragged, branches snapping beneath my frantic steps. In a moment of terror, I burst into a small clearing, my flashlight wildly cutting through the darkness. But there was no sign of my pursuer. The forest had swallowed them whole, leaving me trembling and bewildered. Exhausted and terrified, I stumbled back to the safety of my cabin, locking the door behind me. The night was long, sleepless, haunted by questions without answers. The woods of Whispering Pines had become more than a sanctuary. They had become the setting of a true horror story, a place where darkness concealed the unknown, and the line between reality and nightmare blurred in terrifying ways.